Let's start with the basics about any picture. A picture is essentially two dimensions, the perpendicular intersected by the horizontal at any point. And so what you can say about existence, spatial existence, is it's crucifixional. It's in the form of a cross. Now, unfortunately, in most art, it is impossible to show three dimensions, and so this is hugely represented. This is what's called perspectivism or perspectivalism or whatever. But because this is not 3D, it's really 2D, that means that every picture is a lie. Now, the early iconographers, they believed that you should take perspective and you should invert it. In other words, you should negate the lie and put it in a way which is not like anything three-dimensional. And therefore, that left God as the person responsible for making the picture work in your mind and in your sight. Okay, that's the basics. Now, this picture is the left hand of a triptych, which is called Crucified. We'll deal with all three parts of them, but first of all, let's just have a look at this. Now, if the director could be good enough to focus on what's written there, what's printed there, what I put on there, it's something I wrote and I stuck it there, okay? I want you to read it out to the kid, and if you would, and you know, are you ready? Are you getting there?
Okay.
Come and read it out then.
Unfallingness is the wrenched equipoise of violence against earthly enmeshment, a forcible turning around from compliance in seduction, a painful turning away from the sickening pull of the enchantments of the making to appear of sublucence, being under the wrong light of quotidian reality into the deific, as out of daylight into divine light, reversing the drives and initially whilst awaiting momentum and deific thrust. Hang on, stifled sentences, deific thrust, oh bugger.
Reversing the drives and initially, whilst awaiting momentum and deific thrust, struggling back through the mutated accretions of flesh and its weighted impositions with stifled, sometimes audible groans, casting down agonies, unleashing the God from the crucified pathway, then upwards into the golden lands of Christ's extra dimensionality, crying salvation, deliverance. This is a representation of the young Christ. It shows him circumcised, which is was normative for Renaissance art. It actually meant it was proof that God became man in all respects except sin. In other words, he had erections, he was nocturnal emissions and or whatever. This was a commonplace. They did not back away from this truth. When I put this onto some art sites, it's banned as pornographic, which is absolutely disgusting and stupid. Could you read what that says?
Yes, I'll try.
Okay. Today,
the immortals have become insane, unbinding themselves only with the violent ontologies of death, which they dare to name life.
The immortals have become insane in binding themselves to a false idea which is called mortality. If you identify yourself with the flesh and it dies, then there is nothing in some sense. You are extinguished. But this is to fail to recognize that underneath the flesh, the meat, this meat, there is a God. This is what Christ came to tell us in St. John 10:34-35. He said, I say ye are gods, and refers to Psalm 81 or 82, the Psalm of Asaph, depending on which version of the Bible you read, the Old Testament. And it actually says, I say you are gods. This is what God Almighty says to his brethren. I say you are gods, but you will fall and die like one of the princes. In other words, you will forget your immortal origins and therefore walk around as if you're merely you'll be a walking lavatory serving a life sentence with execution pending. That applies to everyone and everything that breathes, that's animal in some sense, whether it's creature or bigger creature. Okay, this therefore basically is the sign of a cross here. But it's not an ordinary cross, it's as it were a spiritual cross. And this, the idea being, is if you really know how to see rather than to merely look like most walking corpses tend to, you'll see that this can come alive. It's like a form of energy going upwards with striate form across. Okay, that will do for this. I'll now put the central section up and then the right hand side. Okay, can you pause it there? This is the central section of my triptych Crucified. We'll give you a sort of look at it all over, and then I'll deal with particular parts. It's sort of a broken narrative, so we'll go from the left to the right. It's not sequential, and it does not, as it were, exhibit linearity in any real sense, because, as I've said before, linearity is the largest amount of delusion between 2 points. The line is not actually seen in a painting. Its forms are, as it were, but they're bogus. They're bogus. We'll get to that in a while. Say when you want to go to the left, you know.
Sure, anytime. Point it softly.
So, okay, point there and I can start reading it, okay? This says, it says, doolappy, bug happy, mad, crazy, wacko, cuckoo, touch, screwy, loopy, psychotic, deranged, bonkers, unhinged. What's this? Flaky, nuts, possessed, mental, bananas, balmy, raving, frantic, barking, loony, crackers, evangelical. Sorry, that's just a private joke. Now, this here is a picture of my mother, and so this will be maybe 1938. My mother was married at the age of 18, but the man she married was, in a sense, a means of escaping from a life of poverty and hard work. She gave birth to me when her husband was serving in North Africa with the 6th Army Division. This was hidden from me all my life until by accident I found this out, though I'd got some idea that this deception was being practiced. This oven there is where my mother tried to destroy herself and me because of the shame of giving birth when her husband was away in war. Plus I think she'd been a party girl, for want of a description, with her sister in a house of ill repute. I would sit on the steps and get the autographs of famous people who went there. I was only a boy, but still, this is the oven. This is the Most Holy Mother of God. This is, of course, based on William Blake. It's me colouring up Blake. This says, God creating the arsehole. It's probably you. And then, so this is from saved from the oven. Okay? This sort of monstrosity here with many legs dancing around is from Hieronymus Bosch. This also is Boschian, so is this. So what I've done is I've combined sort of hellish features from Bosch. This is me in the centre there, it's me. And it says on it, art is not the cure, death is. It says, am I not worth loving? An insufferable life. Now, there's an icon upside down there. There's something there upside down. Some of these are meant to be hidden, so you're not quite cognizant of them, and they might be obscene, or they might be a form of obscene wit or whatever. This here is a priest called George Dionysius Dragus, who was supposed to be my theology tutor and taught me nothing. It says, from an evangelical convert to a Byzantine backstabber. This man is known as the A.W. Rosenberg, i.e. a great Nazi racist of Orthodox Christianity, by the fact that he only wants Greeks in the hierarchy. So I've put beware of the dog shit and two dogs, the top dog and the bottom dog, which are sort of gay references, are taking a crap on him. Okay, what does that say there? This says nightmare. The word Maya is the medieval word for mare, so nightmare, it means demon. Nightmare means a night demon. What's what it is in Italian for nightmare?
Incubo.
Incubo, the incubus is the one that comes into it. Now here, this is just me messing about. It says, can you read that, Ralph? Can you read that to me?
Getting to it.
Right.
Young and hung.
Young and hung.
Do you have pink poochie sucking nipples or other knockout assets? Contact us immediately.
Thank you. Right, okay. I mean, there's icons and there are other things here, but this will just give some idea about, okay, I'll put the third piece up, all right.
Okay, I'll just focus on the right of the picture because you haven't spoken about that.
Right, well, the reason being is it's, hang on, it's, well, there are obscenities there, so we can skip over them.
The icon at the bottom?
Well, that's an icon of the Most Holy Mother of God. I did this, excuse me a second. I did this with ink, I believe, if I remember, just to show, and I also did one here upside down, if you see it.
Yes.
Right, that's the Most Holy Mother of God, with the Messiah on her knee.
I'll put back to show it all.
Okay.
One.
This is the right-hand panel, the third part of the triptych, Crucified. It shows, it's basically an allegory or analogy for the creation of the penis, such an important event in world history, a source of much agony. But I've also done one on the creation of the vagina, which I based on the works of Catullus and Arnobius and Pausanias, dealing with the castration of the god Attis, but that's mythology. Christ is the one true mythology. It's been said before. Here, there is a statement of my spiritual life, which this young man will read. Can you see it there, Kev? Mm-hmm. If you focus in on it, so that the viewer can get an eyeful. Yeah? Try it then, okay? Say when. Come on, read, for Christ's sake.
Thank you. As a young adventurer penetrating the tornadoes of the spirit, some metamorphoses were extreme, spinning upside down as a divine infant, whilst shining diamond-like with supernal rays, and breaching quantitative laws by shrinkage and expansion into surrounding objects, in realms inhabited by birds, with quasi-human heads, where billions of glittering seahorses played unearthly instruments of inhuman design. In these realms of unblinding scarlets and unspeakably pure white emanations, the Master made me sweat blood and weep at the sight of impeccably glorious golden citadels.
What a reality that is. What I'm saying is art, if it's true art, if it's iconic, i.e. deals with incongruous similitudes, i.e. different levels of elevation, which at the first sight are different from each other, but as it were, are compatible in a conflictual way. As one moves into higher realities, quantitative law of spatio-temporal law, the laws of physics, so-called, are shown to be delusions. So, for example, when Christ walked on water, you have the negation of physical law, because the man that created it is doing with it what he wishes. It's the same with painting. I always say the great 2/5 of my paintings are, but this is a composite of God's energy. If he wills that you should see it from within in a way which exemplifies difference from the actual painting, then my genius, the smaller 2/5 of my genius will meet the greater 2/5 of God's enormous intellect, and your 1/5 should be permitted, given that you've got some intellectual capacities, nous in its highest form. If you have that, then things like this, my paintings will be unlike others in that they will be really transfigurational, and that's what this terrible broken narrative of my life is about. It's saying, on the one hand, there were things that were ghastly, my mother's trade, the fact that she went insane bearing a child who would have been that, as far as I know. I mean, I only found this information out very, very late from a dying aunt who gave me some of it, not the name of my father. All I know is that a lie was maintained by a psychopathic individual and members of my family that I was the son of this man, which was not true. He always detested me, hated me, made me live in fear until I got big enough to fight back. There you are. That's enough for now, I think. Is that okay, kid?